These are the forgotten Super Nintendo games. Yeah, sure, you can wax nostalgia about Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past or Castlevania, but there's a ton of great games out there for the Super Nintendo that just kind of get lost in the shuffle. Great games, these could have been a perfect rental. And maybe you rented them back in the day but completely forgot about it. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here taking a walk down memory lane and checking out the forgotten Super Nintendo games. And a great way to support the channel, not only being a channel member, but I also make my own merchandise, including kind of custom action figure things. I make my own air fresheners, like this one that smells like pina colada and jungle, or this one that smells like styrofoam and static. And I also make my own NES games. These and more available on my Shopify and Etsy, make sure you check them out. Kicking off the list with a personal favorite of mine, this is Dragon View. Now if you were an early adapter to the Super Nintendo, you probably played a game called Draken. Not the most intuitive game, but, you know, it was a game that you probably at least looked at. Well, this is the second one. This is Draken 2, but plays way better. It has these side-scrolling action parts, a little bit like the game Exile, if you ever played Exile. And I was an insane fan of Exile as well. You know, where you're walking through these caves, exploring these caves, you know, slashing enemies, finding treasure chests. Even the towns are that kind of side-scrolling action. But then as soon as you leave the town and explore the rest of the world, that's when it looks like Draken. Because again, this is Draken 2. So it's the fun part of this 3D exploration, but then eventually you're going to find, you know, another town or a cave or something like that. And these little puffs of smoke, that's going to be your enemies. And then when you go to a fight scene, not like Draken, but then it goes into that 2D side-scrolling style fight action. Fight action, that's right. The game is called Dragon View. I love this game. Did you ever play a game called Pieces? Yeah, there was a puzzle game called Pieces, which couldn't look any more like an import Sega Saturn game on this title screen. Remember when so many arcade-style puzzle games kind of looked like this? Yeah, again, to me it reminds me completely of that kind of Sega Saturn era. Now, when I say this is a puzzle game, it is as much of a puzzle. It's a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to put together this jigsaw puzzle before your opponent. The beautiful thing, though, is you also have these items and helpful dealios that will help you in creating your puzzle, like options where you can see where the 3 puzzle pieces you have to work with, where they're supposed to go on the map, or you can kind of do a see through it so you know what the picture looks like on the other side. I mean, it flashes what the picture looks like right before the level starts, or stage starts. So if you love jigsaw puzzles like I do, you're going to love this game. I love the fact that it has those extra items to help you out along the way, too. I like this. I still play it today, but it's a game that, man, no one else talks about. Fighter's History. In an era of every Street Fighter 2 clone that was being pumped out left and right, Fighter's History was actually pretty decent. Got a nice selection of characters to choose from, 9 of them to choose from. You know, most fighting games have a bootleg version of Hogan or Vader. This one has a Bruiser Brody type character, so I'll play as this guy. Fuzzy boots and all, that's right. And other than that, it is just your basic Street Fighter 2 clone. Same type of moves, you know, the quarter circle forward and punch, or, you know, charge left and then push right and attack or whatever. Has the 3 punches, the 3 kicks. It is a Street Fighter 2 clone. But I thought it was pretty decent. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, again, versus all of the other 2D fighting games that were out there. This is just one that kind of just, you know, blended in with everything else, but I thought it stood out personally. Fighter's History is the name of this game. And, yeah, not bad. A nice little palate cleanser when you're too busy playing Street Fighter 2. It was fun to see just what else was out there. Skyblazer is a game that could have been huge, but for some reason it wasn't as popular when it first came out, and people started discovering it later on, but it's still just kind of a forgotten game here, Skyblazer. Fantastic graphics and sound and tight controls and animation, and all the things I was looking for in a Super Nintendo game. Now, of all the games to compare it to, if you ever played Hook for the Super Nintendo, they had it on other consoles too, but let's say you played Hook, right? Yeah, the Robin Williams movie. You know, it was actually a pretty decent game, and Skyblazer, made by the same team, I believe, and plays like more of that, but in a faster, more action-paced atmosphere. I could go on and on about Skyblazer, but I'm just, you know, letting the gameplay do the talking for me, it's one definitely worth checking out. The Super Nintendo had so many great turn-based RPGs, JRPGs they call them now, but Seventh Saga was one that I thought really stood out too. For a lot of different reasons. First of all, you get to choose which kind of character you want to play as. So it's not just like you play as the great hero or the descendant or something like that. You can choose to play as a dwarf, or a robot, or a human, or a demon. Lots of different ways to play it. I'll play as the dwarf for now. Yeah, you still have to talk to the king, and you can talk to the other, companions here too. It might help you out later. And from a distance or from a glance, it just looks like your basic kind of turn-based RPG. Get to get experience, get to level up your weapons and all that. But then on the map screen, that's where I was pleasantly pleasantly surprised because my biggest gripe about turn-based RPGs were the random fight encounters. Well, in this one, it literally gives you a map in the corner that tells you where the enemies are. So if you want to avoid them, you can avoid them. Or if you're trying to level up and level grind and all that, which you should do in this game, then you can just, focus on, where they are to get it over with quicker. And then when you go to a fight scene, it's going to be that kind of behind the back, a little bit like a Phantasy Star style. Or let's see what other Super Nintendo games had this. Well, Mystic Quest, I guess. Seventh Saga, when it comes to turn-based RPGs on the Super Nintendo, is kind of a forgotten game. You mentioned it briefly with Legend of Zelda at the beginning of the video, but if you're looking for another Zelda-type game, Brainlord is one that I can just go on and on about as well. For Brainlord is that Legend of Zelda style game where you're walking around overview. However, you are slashing your sword. But when it comes time to for moving from town to town and you see all the monsters and everything, that's when you're slashing your sword and all that. And jumping. That's right, you can actually jump in this game too. Yeah, you don't need like the Pegasus boots or feather or whatever it is. You can just jump whenever you want. There's a jump button in this game. Gotta love that. And then again, it's fine. It's a Legend of Zelda style game done very well. But nobody talks about it. Too many people are talking about Legend of Zelda or even Lagoon. I love Lagoon. And all these other great games too, but Brainlord is definitely one worth checking out. Congo's Caper is another play as a caveman style game. And there were a few of them on the Super Nintendo. There's always been a few of them for any console. And Congo's Caper is one of the better ones, I thought. Yeah, maybe a little Joe and Mac, a little less Joe and Mac, a little more like Adventure Island or Wonder Boy. Cartoon style, cartoon looking, platforming. It's exactly the perfect kind of Super Nintendo game I'd look for. You kind of have two hits in this game. You play as the boy, but then when you get a hit or get attacked, then you turn into this monkey, which is interesting. Congo's Caper, it's one, if you haven't checked it out yet, might be worth checking out for yourself. I think it's a lot of fun anyway. Not to be outdone, we also have Prehistoric Man, another prehistoric style, play as a caveman style game. So many of these prehistoric games have you play as the caveman when there's also dinosaurs. That's a little fantasy-like because, they're so far apart in evolution style, but still, Prehistoric Man was also kind of fun. And it was just kind of a game that people just would pass up or pass over or just never really got into. You run around, of course you have a club. I'm not sure who started the club idea for the weapon, but here we are. You can also scream, which is kind of fun. You get that Tom and Jerry style scream. That Tex Avery scream, you gotta love that. Not sure if that's copyright, I would think it would be. From prehistoric to moving several centuries into the future, but not quite present time, it's Power Pigs of the Dark Age. So now we're doing Dark Age stuff with these Power Pigs. Well, again, it came out during a time when everyone was looking for that next cartoon mascot. Some of them made it, some of them not so much. This one, not so much, but the game was still fun. You play as a sword-wielding pig. The animation is pretty fun in this game. Again, this game could have been a Saturday morning cartoon, it could have been a breakfast cereal, it could have been a toy line. Who knows, maybe it was in some areas, I don't know. I only know this game for the Super Nintendo game, but it plays like another fun, like Aladdin for the Super Nintendo, just that kind of cartoony, platformy style game that gets passed over. It gets looked over versus all the other great games that are on the Super Nintendo. And this game's pretty decent. It shouldn't be forgotten, but here we are. 10 Star is a game you may have seen come up or pop up, or maybe not at all, I don't know. It looks like another cartoony mascot style game, which it is. Let's not be weird about it. However, as 10 Star, you're just in the game. You're just there too, but you play as the target, and the target is where you are shooting. So it is more of a light gun, it's not a light gun game because you use your controller, but it is more of a target shooting game where you just move the target around and shoot the enemies, you can shoot the bottles, shoot the bosses. There are boss battles in this game, gotta love the boss battles. You know what, it plays like those old-fashioned light gun games that you might see like at a county fair or something like that, or like, an old-fashioned amusement park. It plays like one of those light gun games, a lot of it does. And I'm all good with it. 10 Star, the name of this game, a forgotten game for the Super Nintendo. Here's a game called First Samurai, and if you took everything that you loved about every video game ever, you might find it in this one game. It reminds me, who's that character from SNL from back in the day? Stefan? Something like that, where he's like, oh, this game has everything. There's samurais and magic and time travel and mystic areas and crazy enemies. I mean, it is a kind of hodgepodge of everything all at once in one game. It has that European style of game, if you know what I'm talking about, but fun to see that a game like this could exist on a Super Nintendo that has a little bit of everything. You know, almost like one of those, like, too many cooks spoil the broth. They're just sitting around, there's like, well, what, we should make a video game that has this. Yeah, and samurais, sure, and magic, why not? It's like, let's put it all in the same game. And this is that game. And kind of worth checking out, actually. It's kind of fun. First Samurai. There is a second Samurai, came out for the Mega Drive, not for the Sega Genesis. It did come out in other regions, though, so there is a sequel on the other platform. However, we're looking at forgotten Super Nintendo games in this video. Maybe we'll cover that one in a future video. A lot of great space shooters for the Super Nintendo. Biometal, gotta give it a shout out because it has the soundtrack from 2 Unlimited. That may have been the deciding reason for me to rent this game, because I wanted to hear techno jock jam style music, which I couldn't even tell you how popular it was in the early 90s, if you weren't around in the early 90s. You know, like the Mortal Kombat song that came out during this time too. I mean, songs like this were on the radio, they were at every sporting event, they were at every rodeo. It was just the soundtrack of the early 90s. This techno beat, I say jock jams because they literally had an album called Jock Jams that had a lot of these songs on it. You know, where nowadays they might play like, you know, heavy metal or thrash metal. Back then, it was this kind of techno rave soundtrack. And 2 Unlimited were one of the more popular bands, so they used their music in this game. And never mind the soundtrack, although the soundtrack is great, never mind the soundtrack, the game is actually really good too. So again, today you're looking through ROM lists, you're looking at you know, Super Nintendo games at a convention, and you'd be like, oh, it's another shooter. Okay, there's a ton of shooters for the Super Nintendo, and you just pass over it. But I remember when it first came out, it was a kind of a big deal. That I was like, hey, this, you know, the music from 2 Unlimited is going to be in this game. But even if you took the music out, I don't think they used the 2 Unlimited soundtrack for the Super Famicom version of this game. So even if you took the soundtrack out, it's still a really good game. It's called Biometal, definitely worth checking out. Oh boy, Mohawk and Headphone Jack, the name of this game. That background is super trippy, but very well done. And this was kind of a Sonic the Hedgehog style game for the Super Nintendo. I promise you, whoever created this game definitely played Sonic the Hedgehog. There's a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog vibes in this game. But Mohawk and Headphone Jack, kind of a weird platformy, but you run fast, but you can curl up into a spiky ball. Again, very Sonic. Pick up all the CDs because compact discs were the musical medium for the time. And then the screen can also kind of shift around a little bit in that kind of Mode 7 style rotation nation that it can do sometimes too. It's a little disorienting sometimes actually for Mohawk and Headphone Jack, but it is a forgotten Super Nintendo game, had to bring it up. ActRaiser, probably my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, and it's in my top 5 favorite video games of all time, is ActRaiser. And we've heard of ActRaiser. But the other day someone mentioned, wait, there's an ActRaiser 2? Well, there was, not as desirable. Again, somebody mentioned it, which means he didn't know about it, or maybe it was forgotten, I don't know. Or maybe people chose to forgot about it, I'm not sure. It kind of looks like ActRaiser from a distance, doesn't it? Even when you go down to fight the enemies. However, there is no town building, which to me was kind of fun. It was actually the action part, and then you have the town building part. This one is just the action part, a little bit slower of movement, a little sluggish, not as great. However, it's still a great game. I'm gonna go on record by saying it, because I know I've knocked this game in the past. ActRaiser 2 is a decent game, it's just not ActRaiser. It could have been called literally anything else, and it would have been pretty decent. However, I think by itself, I mean, a lot of the same sound effects and stuff like that are still used in this game too. Great soundtrack in this game too. Yeah, hardly ActRaiser, but it still looks great. I mean, I think everything's great about this game, except for it's not ActRaiser. But maybe that's why it's forgotten. It's Dynamite Kablooey. Came out in Japan as Bomboozled. I remember this because I had a buddy of mine who had this Super Famicom game, so it was like one of the first, maybe it may have been one of the first times I ever played an import video game. I was like, you can play games from Japan on this? And it was like modified like the old-fashioned way. They had to like, you know, burn out some of the backing of it to make it fit. So I played Bomboozled, and then when Kablooey came out, I was like, oh cool, I kind of liked this game. Definitely, it was early release. I don't know if it was a launch title, but it was a very early game. Super clunky, not as desirable, but I had a lot of fun playing this game still. You have to detonate the bombs and then move over to a square where it's not going to blow you up too. And sometimes there's going to be other obstacles in the way, like the ice that'll make you keep slipping. You don't want to fall off the edge. Yeah, there's a lot of trial and error. Unlimited lives as far as I know. Because you can just keep playing the game until you finally pass the level. You know, but if you're just now getting into Super Nintendo collecting and you see this game pop up every once in a while, I mean, it's not for everyone. Kind of a forgotten game. I dig it, probably mostly for nostalgia reasons. Kablooey, a forgotten game for the Super Nintendo. In some people's eyes, probably for the better. Oh, nothing screams Super Nintendo more than a zooming in through the screen face. And this would be Yogi Bear, The Adventures of Yogi Bear. Yes, they made a Yogi Bear game for the Super Nintendo. When I say they, probably someone in Europe, because it definitely has that PAL vibe. It has that European video game vibe of how things are shaded. All the items you can collect, everything's animated, it seems like. It looks like it could have been anything. It looks like, you know, like, hey, here's the adventures of Yogi Bear. Fantastic. You play as this bear and you jump on these enemies' heads. There's picnic baskets you can kind of jump onto. You know, and it looks like they could have just swapped the graphics out with anything else. And if it was me, it could have been like, okay, let's take out Yogi Bear, put myself in there. Instead of the clocks, it's going to be video games, and instead of the picnic baskets, it's going to be cereal boxes, or something. I mean, it could have been anything. But there was a Yogi Bear game on the Super Nintendo? Well, yeah, and it was this one, and it was The Adventures of Yogi Bear, and it's a forgotten game. I'm going to add Lethal Enforcers to this list. Not that it's a forgotten game, but it's a forgotten light gun game. And I mostly associate Lethal Enforcers, this is me, and me personally, me only, I mostly associate this game for the Sega Genesis, or Sega CD. Because that's the version I had. But yes, it came out for the Super Nintendo. During the days of, this was like a nice transitional period when light gun games were kind of becoming back in fashion. And it had like the full video, like, capture of the people in it. So instead of using graphics, it's like actual actors playing the roles of these characters. You know, along with Lethal Enforcers, and then, you know, Lethal Enforcers 2 came out, and then we had like Time Crisis and all these other great games later. All these, there was a span of time when light gun games ruled the arcades. And maybe this was the one that kicked it off, I'm not exactly sure. There were other light gun games before this game, for sure, and plenty more afterwards. But Lethal Enforcers kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but man, what a great game it was, especially for its time. It's definitely dated by now, but at the time, it was like I feel like I'm in a movie, you know, playing a game like this. You know, especially when it has like actual real people that you're, you know, shooting. It's kind of messed up now that I think about it. You know, probably should have been cartoons or something instead of actual people. Maybe that was the fun of it, though. Viacom went through a small period of time where it started making video games, and Zoop was part of those games. Kind of a forgotten, another puzzle game, a fast action puzzle game. This game was available on all platforms except for the NES, it seemed like, but it was on Super Nintendo, Genesis, it was on like 3DO, came out for PlayStation 1, I believe, during this time. It was on Mac, it was on PC, it was, I mean, handhelds, it was everywhere. A game like this could have been, I'm not making this up, a game like, and maybe somebody made a homebrew about it by now, a game like this could have been on the Atari 2600. That's how simplistic the gameplay is, however, still kind of, is it a fun game? I don't know. I still look at it every once in a while just cuz. Time Slip is a decent run-and-gun style game if you're into games like Contra, for instance. Here's Time Slip. So if you love that run-and-gun style game, like a Contra 3, like a Turrican or something like that, then you're gonna like Time Slip if you've never checked it out. It's just another game, a run-and-gun, pick up your items, pick up your guns, goes through the eras, that's the time part of the Time Slip. You know, you're like kind of back in the day, and then like, you know, as you move on, then you become, you know, more and more into the future and all that too. Just your kind of basic run-of-the-mill run-and-gun style game, and ain't nothing wrong with that, especially if that's what you're looking for. But if you've never played it or never checked it out, it's like, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. You don't know what you don't know. And hopefully now you do. And if this game is up for you, then it might be worth checking out for you. Time Slip for the Super Nintendo, another forgotten game for the Super Nintendo. And if you have any forgotten Super Nintendo game recommendations, put them in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for subscribing. I'm going to do more of these style of videos for the other consoles as well. Those are coming out soon. Love checking out games that maybe people have forgotten, but if you're looking for the 5-star Super Nintendo games, well, we got those for you right over yonder. Thanks for watching.